Here we go. Am I streaming now? It says it's live. Okay. So, hi everybody, Jersey Drost, comicsargreat.com, well, jdrost.com, boulderandfleet.com, a lot of different websites. The most important one. Oh, there we go. Gotta stop that. Stop that nonsense. There we go. You know, YouTube, I love your live streaming software, but how you always launch the video for me once I started streaming, so then I get that audio back to me. It's kind of a pain in the tuchus. Alright, so boulderandfleet.com is the site that I hope you will pay attention to, or go read my webcomic there. This is the a cover for an upcoming print edition of a story that just wrapped recently called A Friendly Game. And cover kind of spoils the monster of the story, but you know, it's a compelling image, as the kind people who support me on Patreon pointed out. Hey Mags. While it does give away the monster, it's a pretty, it's an exciting image. Trying to ink these lines kind of thick too, because this image is going to be reduced down to this size when I'm done. So it's going to be a wraparound cover. See, this side is the front cover right here. So the logo goes. This will be the back cover. What am I using to ink with? Let's start with that, in case you're watching this from the beginning. Here are the tools. I have a Fude brush, a Pentel color brush, Pentel pocket brush, and a Pentel stylo. It's an old plastic fountain pen. And I've got a white correction pen, a Uniball Sino. Uniball Silo, then the Pentel stylo. I really need to make a web page that explains all the tools that I use. So I could just say, like, jdrost.com/tools, right? Like Jake Parker does. So anyway, here I go. I suppose I could try to put on some music, or I could just talk my way through this. Problem with YouTube streaming in music is the content ID system flags virtually anything that you use. So, and then like the YouTube live service says, like, well, you could use, we've got like a whole bunch of stock music you could put in there. I don't think you can I don't think you can put it as a what was it, like a bed of music, like underneath my audio, right? Let's go back to there. I don't know, I'll have to try that. So why am I inking this on paper instead of digitally inking? Because, well, for one reason. One reason is that this particular story was inked on paper. I did it last year as part of the Inktober challenge, Inktober.com. And so I thought, well, we'll keep the look of the whole project consistent if the cover is also inked by hand. But also, another reason is I just recently went to the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum, and seeing all those giant pieces of comics art on display with all the art on the boards, like the lettering, the zip tones, everything on the boards. It really made me want to go back to doing it that way. As much as I love digital inking and the tools and affordances of digital drawing software like Clip Studio Paint, something about, I know a lot of people have said this isn't the most unique and profound thought, but there's something about the mistakes that happen when you do it by hand, and the decision-making process of deciding whether or not you want to correct it or live with it. That friction becomes a lot more, how do I want to say, is it more or less intense at the digital level? Let me say it this way: at the digital level, when you're inking digitally, there's less friction to make the change, right? Command Z. Whereas, or Control Z, whatever. But you're inking by, like on paper, breaking out the correction pen and trying to fix something becomes, it adds just like an extra layer of like, well, do I really want to monkey with it? Like for instance, Maggie's eyes here. Let's see if I can get it close enough so you can see. It's kind of hard to see. It's out of focus now. I goofed on her eyes, and so I broke out the correction pen, and I was like, all right, well, I'll draw in the new whites. And I gotta wait for that to dry while I ink something else, whereas like it'd be a couple key commands to fix that on the computer, right? Now, if you haven't read A Friendly Game yet, there's another mistake I just made. It's at boulderfleet.com. The story, it'll land you on the end of the story. And you go to boulderfleet.com/archive to go back to early piece of the story, or earlier chapters. It's also on Tapastic for a little while longer. I'm thinking I'm gonna take it off of Tapastic. As nice as it is to have, you know, all those subscribers there. That whole nonsense that happened recently with the terms of service changes. And yes, I know they backtracked, but I just don't need that kind of headache. I don't want to have to worry about taking it down later because of some funny terms of service thing. I'm trying to add detail, but not too much detail, because after all, it's going to be shrunk down that big when I'm done, and doesn't do me any good to create like detail that I have to wrestle with and ultimately lose anyway. But in this story called A Friendly Game, our heroes meet this character, Pat, who's a compost farmer, and this chicken who is kind of a bully to Pat. It's called A Friendly Game because Maggie, whose cafe they're in, has a rule that all conflicts must be settled by game, no fighting. And so they play a game. But then it doesn't end there, of course, because it is an action and adventure story. I don't know which pen is which anymore. Well, that's my drier one. Okay, so let's leave the dry one aside. What do I got going here? What do I do? And so this monster, if you read the story, you'll find out it's called it's a living mulch. Like some like sort of semi-sentient pile of rotting vegetables and stuff. almost lost the point of my brush. But yeah, the big idea was that I wanted to, I've made no secret, or rather I've talked extensively about how Boulder and Fleet is my exploration of exciting action adventure stories, but with an eye on exploring pacifism, or how do you solve problems nonviolently. But I still really, really love exciting displays of physical prowess. So how do you do that without having somebody get hurt? And so the way I solved it in this particular story is, although this guy is sort of our villain of the story, he's not the one they ultimately have to fight. This thing is the thing they have to fight because of him, right? So you still get your exciting action adventure without having heroes smashing bad guys on the head in order to prove their point. That's the idea, anyway. Now, when this is done, I'm going to ink it, or rather, I'm going to scan it. And then I'm actually going to, this cover, I'm excited about it because I'm going to try doing letterpress printing with this one. Historically, Boulder and Fleet mini comics have been screen printed, which is, I don't know if you can even hear that. You've seen screen printing before. It's like how t-shirts are usually printed, right? It's a screen with little tiny holes in it, and then I make a stencil of the image of the purple and an image of the yellow, and I pull ink through the screen with a squeegee, right, and line this up by hand. It's kind of time consuming, but it creates a really nice texture. Like when you run your finger across this, you can feel the ink on the surface. It has like this chalky raised feel. And it has its own interesting limitations in that, like if you look at Boulder's pocket there, well, you can see that you can't get really fine detail on these. You got to keep the art super simple. So letterpress, on the other hand, is you can get a lot more detail, and because I don't know if you've ever seen it, you can do a search for like letterpress, or if you saw it on my Instagram, I posted a picture of, I was doing a letterpress class the other night at the library, participating in one anyway, and when it presses the art onto the paper, it creates like this little impression, so it sort of embosses the paper. Now, in the old days, that was considered a flaw. You weren't supposed to do that. You're supposed to get it set just so that the ink just like gently touches the paper and then it prints on. But as the technology has come back into fashion amongst artists, that flaw in the technology becomes sort of like a selling point. It's like you can use that to incorporate interesting things into the design in terms of how could you use that embossing to give a sense of importance to different design elements. Now, I have to say, I did not think that through that clearly when I was drawing this cover. I was just trying to come up with an exciting image. So now, as I explore different color options, that becomes part of the calculus. How can I use color in such a way to enhance this design and use that sort of embossing that happens to enhance the design? I might not be able to. I mean, as I'm looking at the different color tests I've been doing, I'm like, I don't know. Anything I do that like plays with creating impressions on the page, like a big area of impression, makes the image too cluttered. Because I think part of what makes this work right now is all of that negative space. So when this is done, when I'm done inking it, and when I've got my color figured out, I'm going to send this off to a company in Michigan that actually makes letterpress plates. And it looks like, if you've ever seen like a rubber stamp. Oh, I got one right here. I got this rubber stamp. You've seen these kinds of things before, right? So like, you look on the bottom and there's like a raised image, right? And then when you push it on the ink, you can stamp it out of things. Same kind of idea. So they'll make a raised image of this out of copper, and then the color won't have a raised image. Oh, thanks, Owen. Good to see you. Thanks for hanging out with me while I ink this thing. Yeah, this kind of stuff is like super fun to draw, like windy, irregular things. A lot more fun to draw than... I just finished a piece where I had to draw like a little downtown area, downtown buildings. And I was like, it's okay. Drawing buildings, not so fun. Like when I was a kid, I dreamt of being the next great Spider-Man artist, and looking at, like, thinking about doing that now. It's like I would probably be very excited about the prospect of drawing a Spider-Man comic, but the first time I'd have to draw in New York City, I'd be like, oh, no thanks. I'm drawing energetic fantasy mulch monsters. I could do that all day. Thank you, Caspel. I'm really glad. I'm super glad to hear that. Yeah, let's see how it's done or see how it looks when it's done. But so far, I'm kind of digging it. Time to break out the pocket brush for some contouring. I like the pocket brush a lot, but I like the brush on the Fude much, much more. It's a little bit longer and a little bit thinner. It's kind of... It doesn't give you, well, at least the ink cartridges I have on these right now are not waterproof, which is kind of a bum out. And especially makes it hard when you want to put whiteout or correction fluid over top of it. And the ink is, because the ink's not nearly as opaque as on my pocket brush, but there's so much more fine control. Oh, hi there, Marlon. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me while I do this. Have I tried the Kuretake? Yeah, actually I did. I got it was a pressure-fed Kuretake, so it was a lot like the pocket brush in that hard chamber in the back. You don't squeeze to add more ink. There's like the ink cartridges are pressurized, so you get like a constant stream of ink. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. I bought it specifically because Jake Parker spoke so highly of it, and then I saw Scotty Young talking about it as well. And so I thought, well, if it's good enough for them, I mean, I should give it a try. It was okay. I still have yet to find anything that makes me as happy as this one, though. And I think it has a lot to do with that long, narrow tip. So if I find a Kuretake, I'm going to have to... if I can find a Kuretake that's a pressure-fed one with a long, narrow brush like that, then I might have to give that a try. I'll have to look on jet pens again. Oh, and I agree, yes. Even Spider-Man would become a job at some point or another, right? As fun as it would be. I have a confession. How about this? This will take advantage of the live stream to do a little what the kids call real talk. I've always loved doing my own projects, but for a long time, there was a sneaking suspicion inside of me that part of my passion for my personal projects was, in fact, a smokescreen that I was creating for myself and others to excuse the fact that I wasn't doing the big superhero books, right? Because if I was good enough, I'd be doing them. Oh, well, I'm not good enough. So, hey, I guess I love my personal projects. I always had like this creeping suspicion that that was the truth behind the whole thing. But in recent years, I can't pinpoint it. There was no moment where a switch flipped on this one, but it's just like now it's like I feel like it's really coming from a place of honesty. Doing this stuff, and doing the Captain Seriously stuff, which I have like an immense amount of creative power over, right? There's very little editorial interference on that. And I feel like I get to direct a lot of the energy in that project. Those are things where I feel really, truly satisfied. And so, and having done a bunch of freelance stuff for different companies, right? I did like storyboards for Nintendo commercials at one point, and it was like there was that giddy thrill, like, "Whoa, am I really doing this?" Doing character design and pitch work for Nickelodeon Junior, all very satisfying, all super fun, and I'm really grateful for it all. But it's like, yeah, ultimately, it is just a job. I guess maybe the difference is that when I was younger, I didn't have that perspective because I hadn't done those jobs yet. And so then I did the jobs. I'm like, yeah, that was really cool. That was very satisfying. For some reason, didn't leave me feeling as satisfied as when I do my own stuff. And so now when I think about the prospect of doing a superhero book for Marvel or DC, a Spider-Man book, or let's see, what would be another one, a dream project. I'd love to do a Blue Devil comic with Dan Mishkin. That would be really fun. But see, that's a comic that Dan created, so I feel like there'd be a lot of special energy in that one. But I have the perspective now that I know that, yes, it would be satisfying up to a point, right? Well, Caspel, I thank you so much. That means a lot. That's very gratifying to hear. Yeah, I'm going to post the finished inks on my Patreon later today with some of the color tests I've been doing. That's at patreon.com/Jersey, just my name. But you'll be able to see the inks as they come together here on the live stream, at least. And then later on this year, when this book is in print, you'll be able to see the cover. Who knows? I might wind up actually digitally coloring this too and turning it into some kind of a print. So I really like the way it's turning out. Oops. But oh, and you know what I'm talking about, because I mean you colored for DC, or still color for DC. I mean, there's like that initial thrill of like, wow, I'm working on this, and it's really cool, and it's nice to get paid to do it, but something about pursuing your own ideas. Like, as good as all of that feels, one of the best feelings I ever had was when I bumped into somebody on the streets of Ann Arbor who happened to be familiar with my work. Doesn't happen often. And this is like one of the few nice things about, there's a lot of nice things about podcasting, but this is one of the nice things about podcasting is somebody actually recognized me by my voice. I'm like, oh, I know that voice. And his kids were with him, and he introduced his kids to me, or he introduced me to his kids by saying, this is the guy who draws Boulder and Fleet. And the kids did this, you know, that was pretty cool. I won't deny it. I won't put any false modesty on that one. That was like having little kids be impressed because you created something that made them happy and they know about it, and it's your personal thing. Yeah. Oh, this is a really good point, Owen. Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 150%. If those are just watching the video, working on capes and other known properties has its moments, but they're fewer and farther between when you've done it for a while, and deadlines and editorial end up making you hold back creatively in the end. Yes. You wind up making choices out of expediency in the work because you have to. You absolutely have to, for the sake of making your deadlines. Now, that's something I'm trying to bring into Boulder and Fleet to get work done faster, because when I start updating the new comic, I want to produce it more quickly. And so I'm like, all right, how can I take the capacity that I gained or discovered in the last professional deadline I had and apply it to this? Yeah, I know it's an old story. We've all tried it, but that's part of that constant refinement and tweaking that we do with our work to see. It's part of the exploration process. And yeah, I agree with you, Owen, that like the fun and the creativity are easier to sustain in your own work, right? And while I do want to learn how to apply the expediency that I learned through my last deadline, I have the freedom to noodle if I really want to. I have the freedom to say, no, it needs something, it needs a little bit more. I don't know what yet, but I'll find it. Whereas with a professional deadline, freelance, work for hire, whatever you want to call it, there comes a time where you don't get the noodle anymore. You have to let it. I mean, every comics project I've ever done for a publisher or for a client, there's been decisions that were made where it was like, this isn't perfect, but it's got to go out the door, right? Now that's something I want to bring that to Boulder and Fleet, because whenever I've done that on a professional gig, I've always looked back on the work afterwards and been like, hey, it's not bad. It's pretty good. So it's kind of long. All that to go. Am I going to be able to finish it in a half hour? You betcha I am. Because I got an early start working on this part. Which pen am I using here? Still got to do some contour stuff. I think another reason that I was telling myself stories about what my real motivation was behind personal work is that this is a part of me who gets a little uncomfortable with the notion of ego. I want something that only I could make to be in this world, right? That's another one that I've kind of gotten a little bit more relaxed about, because that's a perfectly human feeling. Why wouldn't I want to interact with this world and have my contributions matter in some way? It'd be lying to say I don't want that, right? And that kind of false modesty is, not exactly noble. But I think, I mean, this is all also to point at the fact that, and I think this actually still persists among creators, that there is an assumption that most of us, if not all of us, ultimately really want to land at one of the superhero publishers, right? And if you say you don't, well, you're kind of kidding yourself. You're trying to come up with a handy narrative to explain why you didn't land there. And like I said, that was the That was the big internal dialogue I was having about it. So this was fun working out the kineticism of this thing as it's lunging. This feels that feels familiar somehow. It feels like I've seen this someplace. I wonder if one of my favorite things to explore as a cartoonist, one of my favorite things to draw, I should say. Exploring, that sounds kind of fancy. One of my favorite things to draw is just like objects. I love how, yeah, okay, here we go. This is one of the things I love about comics so much, is that nothing's moving. So how do you find the movement, or how do you find the moment? Just the right moment, just the right arc, just the right pose, just the right angle. That gives the impression of movement, that suggests movement, that makes the reader say, oh my gosh, that's really moving. That particular challenge, which in my younger years was more of a, not a pleasant challenge, a frustrating challenge, is now one that I take a lot of delight in. I love that about this medium. I didn't know you. Maybe I did know that you were working on SpongeBob, but I didn't remember that offhand, Owen. Yeah, I can imagine that would be a fun one to do. That is a comic I would not say no to. If I was given the chance, I would love to do a short story for that. And they always get such great artists to work on it. I mean, that would be half the appeal for me. It's like, wow, I'm working on a book that Jerry Ordway works on, and that Ramona Fraden works on, and my buddy Greg Schiegel works on, Owen Jolens works on. Raoul the Third, man. And I am willing to bet, Owen, that part of the fun of that comic is the fact that you are working with comparatively, I don't want to say simpler. It's not simpler color, is it? It's that you're doing a lot of, not everything's not all shiny, right, or dark. You probably get to play with more kinds of color in that comic, I'm guessing, based on what I've seen. I mean, it's been a few months since I read it. Like one of the more recent ones I read was the Ballad of Barnacle Bill, which was amazing. It's so funny. Oh, that's good. Yes, that is an important factor. The artists always deliver on time, so colorists get good deadlines. That makes a big difference because yes, colorists and I'm guessing letterers are the last in line when it comes to comics deadlines, which means that you get to pick up the pace of everybody else in the production chain. So actually having like a reasonable amount of time to color something, it's got to be luxurious. I'm forgetting my little tufts of grass. Oh, Marlon, you're saying this reminds you of bone? Actually, you know what? I could see, like, at least with this little business of this lunging thing that has some kind of Jeff Smith kinds of energy. I will not profess to have anywhere near his inking chops, but I thank you for that comparison. Uh-oh. We're going to fix that right now. There we go. I'm a little worried about how much detail is on this, considering how much is going to be shrunk and the fact that I'm going to use letterpress, but my wife Anne, who uses letterpresses a lot, has assured me that you can get very, very fine detail on them, so. What's the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is I have to like bump up the threshold on this so that I kick out some of the line detail. And I've got nice strong contours on these guys, so I know that their forms will persist even if I lose some of the detail on this in the print edition. Another thing I like about this particular brush pen, and I think this has probably something to do with the fact that the ink is not waterproof, is it dries really fast. So I have to be super careful about where I'm putting my hands once I've started working. Back when I used to use a crow quill a lot, I mean, I don't know if I have any of my crow quills handy. But, I mean, that was my #1 tool of choice. Oh, and you'll probably remember that from the art and story days. I used to talk a lot about how I would never use a brush. Love the crow quill, and I did, and I still do. But when I would be drawing with it, I would have to turn the page around and let that dry while I work over here, so the way pages would come together would be very piecemeal. Whereas with this, it dries pretty darn quick, so I can stay in the same area for longer. And I do love that they make so many kinds of brush pens too, because that's a fun thing to play with all the time. When I was in Columbus a couple weeks ago, we went to a Blick art supply store, and while they didn't have like, it wasn't like oh my gosh, I can never say the name, Kinokuniya. There was no Kinokuniya in terms of having brush pens and different kinds of ink pens to play with, but we all have this affliction, right? It's like once you start using art tools all the time, it becomes a really fun game, hanging out in art stores and just playing with all the different supplies. Where's it? Kinokuniya. Oh, that's gonna be eating at me all day. the... How am I finding sketchbook summer so far? Well, I mean, I was just talking about this the other day with a buddy. I love so much that the conceit of the thing is that you're supposed to be playful, right? Share if you want, but don't be precious, right? There is no such constraint on things like Inktober, right? Inktober is like, it's very simple, ink sketch or ink drawing every day for the month of October. Up to you as far as how far do you want to take that. Do you want it to be like a finished publishable piece, or do you want it just to be a sketch, right? And I will admit that even though I put all these different kinds of personal gamified constraints on my Inktober every year, like, oh, I wonder if I can make this out of Inktober, like how I made this very comic out of last Inktober. There's still like a pressure to perform with that. Like, I want to do a really good job with each of those entries. And I want to make sure I check in every day, right? I don't want to miss a day, and if I do, I'm going to feel bad about it. Sketchbook Summer has this wonderful element of 30 days. You know, just fill a sketchbook in 30 days. You don't have to check in every day. So I haven't felt like this enormous pressure. And also, because Brandon and Matthew use that's very specific language of like, this should be playful stuff, and this should be, you know, sketchbooks where you fail. Man, that opened it up. So it's probably the most, I don't want to say relaxing, but it's been the most pleasantly fun art challenge I've done yet. So I've been loving it. And yeah, I've been sketching in my sketchbook, and not everything gets shared. You know, some of that stuff's for me. Some of that stuff is brainstorming for future Boulder and Fleet stories. Some of it's just me playing with style. Some of it's me trying to teach myself something, you know. So yeah, I really like the whole idea of just they've tricked me into checking in on my sketchbook more often. Is what they've done. And it's been really fun watching everybody else's. I like that a lot of other people have interpreted, or rather have taken Brandon and Matthew up on that challenge to keep it playful and keep it fun. And so I'm just seeing like the loose exploratory stuff by other artists. Okay, so you know how like when you were watching Inktober happen, and like there's drawings that make you say like, oh, that's so good, that's good, that's challenging me to up my game. Sketchbook Summer challenges me in a different way. It challenges me to be more exploratory. Yeah, Brandon and Matthew tricked us into sketchbooking, right? And like, I think that also makes this thing feel even more wholesome, right? It feels less like a stunt for him to market something, and it feels more like Brandon's really living that philosophy of paying it forward and keeping it, like giving to the artistic community. And even if he does want to use it as like some kind of like way to like market something else that he's doing, like let's suddenly at the end of the year he says like, oh hey, look, it's the sketchbook manual, how to do Sketchbook Summer the right way by Brandon Dayton. It wouldn't feel creepy to me. Partially because I like Brandon and I trust Brandon, but also because I think the spirit of the challenge is just it's like he got everybody to eat healthier, you know? He got us to all do something that is good for us to do, and made it fun for us to do it. Also, another conversation I was having a lot at A2CAF was with like some younger artists was this notion of, the struggle of the journey, according to some of these artists, doesn't get expressed enough. In other words, they were saying something to the effect of how where I am in my career, to which I responded with like, well, I don't know where I am with my career, and what's more is like, there's no such thing as having made it, and if I have made it, it's taken me literally 25 years of really fighting hard to get where I am, working really hard. I shouldn't say fighting really hard. I haven't fought anybody, but working super hard and trying to put everything I have in every project and preparing for every opportunity that comes my way and living up to the expectations and challenges and everything. And they said, well, that kind of story doesn't get told enough. And I was like, really, doesn't it? I don't know. It seems like it does to me, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe this is something. And so, to bring it back to Sketchbook Summer, I think that the sharing of your sloppy drawings, right, and people at various stages of their careers, various stages along their paths, to all share like that, I think is ultimately a very good thing. So Owen says, it's done this weird trick that's let me get past having to have such a structured approach to practice, which I was using as an excuse to not push beyond drills. Practice is much more fun now. Yeah, right. I totally fall victim to that. As somebody who talks a lot about, ETPs, structuring my day, chunking my process, sometimes I find that I'm using it to protect myself from doing a bad job, and when I protect myself from doing a bad job, I'm not challenging myself, which means I'm not growing, which means I'm not doing as much interesting stuff. So that's another thing that, I too responded a lot to that aspect of it. If you're not failing, you're not pushing yourself. It sounds so trite, and it sounds so life coachy to say that, but it's absolutely true. As satisfying as it is to do something really well, people saying nice things about this drawing I'm doing right now, but if I'm not struggling with something, then what's the point of doing it? How are we doing on time? Uh-oh, I'm only 10 minutes out from finishing, for the live stream to finish. I can't finish this in 10 minutes. Oh no. I'll have to go long. I might. See, this is one of those things where if this was a freelance gig, I would start looking for shortcuts to take in the work, right? But I like the pace I've got going right now, and I don't want to mess with it. But yeah, Brandon and Matthew both deserve like a really a big heap of praise for finding a way to gamefully address the notion of sketching. And it was such a simple but such an effective idea of just making us more aware of one another while we're doing it. and making us more aware of one another in a way where we're in control of who's watching, in the sense that we don't have to share it if we don't want to. But when we see other people doing it, we'll be like, oh, I wanna be part of that discussion. I wanna be part of that conversation. So then that incentivizes us to do it. And is the kind of thing, Rob and I kind of touched on this on Leaning to Art yesterday, and it's something that I want to start digging at a little bit deeper. It's this idea of FOMO and how I think it's such a troublesome and problematic thing. Because I don't like how it separates people. I don't like how it excludes people. But and Sketchbook Summer has an element of it, but it's so easy to get on board and be part of it that there's really no excuse for FOMO, right? It's like, well, I want to be part of that too. Well, then pick up a sketchbook and go, because everybody else is just doing sloppy drawings. Do your sloppy drawings. Here we go. Have fun. I love that about it. It feels so much healthier. All right. Let's see. How can I do this? Got a lot of overlapping things here. By the way, we've been talking a lot about Sketchbook Summer. For those of you who don't know, probably everybody here knows about it, but in case you haven't heard about it and you're feeling like, what the heck are you talking about? SketchbookSummer.com. If you haven't Googled it already, or done an internet search for it already. Eagle-eyed readers will remember that this is the sign that I'm making right now that is in the swamp, where warning you of dangers of living mulches, fire skeletons, and I forget what else. I forget what else that Fleet said was in the swamps. I like the idea of, I like the image that gets conjured when I say fire skeletons. That's why I got mentioned in Pickles and Taft and in Boulder and Fleet. I'll have to do a story where those creatures appear at some point. Now, is that kind of soft brush stuff going to show up when I get the plates made? Who knows? But I like the way it looks, right? Let's get it. That kind of stuff right there. I don't know. Might be able to finish this close to 2 o'clock my time. For those who are wondering, it is 1:56 p.m. here in Michigan, United States of America. What does that make it, like 7 or 8 p.m. your time, Owen? So you're done for the day. Well, probably not done for the day. If you are done for the day, congratulations. That's right, today's Friday too, so everybody, uh, 1900, working on corrections for a project. Ah! Hope you guys have an awesome weekend, by the way. All of you. This weekend I'm going to another letterpress event to learn more about the printing process. I want to make sure that when I start working on this cover, like getting the cover printed, that I know what I'm doing. And then I think Sunday is going to be more Boulder and Fleet work. Almost there. Try to keep that art in the shot, huh? So what is all this, all those little bits of flotsam inside of the living mulch is like the idea that I was going with is I'm imagining it being this creature that largely just sits in. The idea came from I was at the zoo actually, and I saw this tortoise that all it does is it sits underwater and it holds its mouth open like this, and it's got this tongue that looks like worms. It's got like little prickly things on it. I forget what kind of tortoise it was, or turtle. It was a tortoise. Yeah. No, I don't remember. It was a tortoise or a turtle. You get the idea. And it waits for little fishies to come and try to, like, you know, get whatever creature they think its tongue is, and then grabs them. Right? So it's like, oh, he doesn't go hunting. He sits and waits, like a crocodile kind of does, or an alligator. So I thought, okay, so this thing's kind of like that. It sits in the swamp, and if some poor, unsuspecting person happens to trip upon it, sucks you down, and you slowly get decomposed inside of it. So, but there would be things that don't get decomposed, like if there's any like rock that gets knocked into the swamp, certain kinds of hardwood, if like your wagon or whatever you're traveling with has is made of like really hard processed wood, I guess. What would you call that? Or, in the case of what's up here that I got to ink in a second, bones. So it'd be remnants of poor creatures that got slowly decomposed by this thing. That's pretty horrific. And that's how you can do really exciting adventure with real stakes without having it be all about punching or gunplay. Speaking of which, since here in the States, Netflix got Moana, I finally got to see that. And having talked about all the stuff I've talked about today in terms of, like, you know, what Boulder and Fleet means to me, oh my god, I love that ending so much. And I watched Kubo and the Two Strings right after that. Like, it was like in the same weekend I watched both of them. And both of those just pushed all the right buttons for me in terms of how they solved the problems of the story. I didn't love everything about Moana, but I did love that ending a lot. You could totally punch a swamp. Yeah. You know, that was something that we didn't deal. I didn't get a chance to deal with in the story. It's like, would Boulder be okay with whacking a swamp in the swamp face? My guess is no. My guess is he would be like, nope, it's even if it's like only a semi-sentient thing, it's still a living thing. Thankfully, he didn't have to make that decision because Pat came to help in the story. And as a vegetarian who's kind of, you know, kind of tightly strung about animals and animal rights, and, you know, actually like look for products that don't do animal testing and all that stuff. I've been dismayed by some of the reporting that's been done recently about how trees have a sort of sentience, which, I mean, sure, all living things have some kind of sense of being alive, otherwise they wouldn't try to survive, right? But I've been reading these articles about how trees can communicate with one another through chemicals that they kick into the air, and like there's certain trees where, like, when a bug starts to eat it, it'll emit some kind of pollen to let the other trees know, oh my gosh, I'm being eaten by a bug. And there's trees that supposedly, you know, what was it? You can do a search for it. It was something about how they suspect that these trees are telling jokes of some kind to one another, which I thought was like, well, really? And then I read the article and I was like, okay, so it's not like knock knock who's there, but it's But like there's like some kind of reaction that happens amongst these trees when they emit this certain chemical into the soil. So I'm like, oh no. If these things are communicating in such a way and have some kind of sentience that we wouldn't understand, now I gotta grapple with the ethics of killing vegetables. And then I'll have to switch to a diet where I only eat things where I'm just like plucking, right? Here's my tomato plant. I'm just pulling the tomatoes off, which is a form of harm, but what am I going to do? Eat rocks? But at least I'm not killing the plant to do it, right? Here's the skeleton. But yes, some of my local friends have heard me complain about this, and they're like, well, what are you going to do? Become a Jain Buddhist? I'm like, well, they make those shoes, so don't step on any ants. That'd be nice. Become utterly insufferable. Carrots probably don't communicate. Oh, and thank you for letting me off the hook. And if they did, they would be jerks. Nature's meanest vegetable. That's what these scientists need to do. They need to file a report that shows that yeah, carrots are telling jokes, and they're very disparaging jokes. They're trolling one another. Oh, I'm gonna eat you. I'm gonna eat you so good. God, you're messing up my lines, Owen. Almost there. And I'm only 8 minutes over. But yeah, that kind of hand wringing that I do, I know it makes me very difficult to live with sometimes. I mean, when you think about it, like, imagine spending all your time around somebody who's fretting about the ethics of virtually everything they do. Is it right? Is it good? Is it just? Oh, for corn's sake, just do something. Okay. Now, all that's left, as far as I can tell, is this animal skull. Animal skull? I thought it was a kid's comic. It is. And the original Star Wars films were kids' movies. So you can have a skull. Because, I mean, what do kids love more than... Well, certain kids love more than skeletons. My only other option is to become an airbending master so I can extract nourishment from the air. Can they do that? Now I know why Master Tenzin was my favorite character in that series. Well, actually, no, I take it back. Toph was my favorite character. Oh, God, I love Toph. But I think I loved her for the reason that, like, a lot of us love certain characters. Like, they represent what you could never allow yourself to be. I crave that sense of self-confidence and self-assuredness and ability to impose my will on others. No, I don't. That's why I don't do that. But it's fun to watch somebody else be like that. Huh. I did not know that, Owen. I didn't remember that. I watched Korra a long time ago, but I love Tenzin. God, he really made that show work for me. And I think as somebody who works with a lot of teenagers, I related to his struggles a lot. All right. I think we have a cover. Now it's all left for me to scan it. Oh, scanning. And then, run some color tests on it. So, awesome. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with me while I worked on this, and for the fun conversation, and for making me feel better about hurting trees, or hurting carrots. And I will be posting the final, or rather the scan of this, on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Jersey. Let's get some more shading in here a little bit. It'll be for patrons only to see the high-res scan. Oh yeah, I missed a spot there. There we go. Let's get a little definition on here. And of course, if you haven't read it, the comic that this cover is for can be found at boulderandfleet.com. And if you have any questions, comments, or wonderings that you want to bring to me after the stream, you can reach me on Twitter, @Jersey on Twitter. But the place where I'm really enjoying myself socially online is Instagram. And that's instagram.com/JerseyDrozd. I really like Instagram a lot more than Twitter. And mostly because, like, Instagram, the people I follow are mostly artists, and it's fun to just watch their art. Or if not their art, stuff that they're doing. So, that'd be probably the best place to reach out to me. So, alright, I'm going to kill the stream, and I will see you guys next time. Till then, Jersey Drozd, boulderandfleet.com, Jersey on Twitter, Jersey Drozd on Instagram. Okay, bye.